Hi everyone, and I'm your host, the Legendary I, and this time we're going to be doing a servant overview slash how to use guide on Summer Hokusai or Hokusai Saber, whichever one you want to call her. And if you didn't know, on my channel I actually do a bunch of solo videos where Hokusai is the main damage dealer and she just basically kind of battles bosses by herself for the most part. So yeah, I feel like this is probably one of the best videos to start this kind of possibly series on. I guess my only plan for it is to kind of skip over the stats and just go into the skills and then kind of go from there so that you could kind of learn what command codes will work best. And I really hope that this will help someone that really needs kind of some guidance on the NA JP side to actually help them use command codes a little bit better and things like that. So, let's get on to Hokusai. Okay, so Saber Hokusai is actually a 4-star servant, a free 4-star servant that you get from the current event that's going on in NA. It's called, well, it's the Las Vegas event. It's the summer event for this year, and I feel like she's really important to get. So, let's get into the skills. First skill is Divine Power Inc., rank C. Increases her own MP gauge, and she gains critical stars. Now, the MP gauge goes from 10% to 20%. The stars range from 10 to 20, and the cooldown goes from 7 to 5. And by the way, this depends on skill level, so the more you level up the skill will be the lower the cooldown and the more benefits you'll gain from leveling it up. Now, the second skill is called Father-Daughter Connection B. Increases her critical star gather rate for 3 turns and applies guts to herself for 1 time, 3 turns. Now, in terms of the kind of stats to it, the critical star absorption is from 300 to 500%, and she revives with in between 1,000 and 2,000 HP. Now, for the cooldown, it goes from 9 to 7, once again depending on skill level. For the third skill, which is Pseudonym Dragon Crested Octopus, rank B, increases her Arts Count effectiveness for 3 turns, and applies increased critical strength to herself for 3 turns, but only when landing a critical hit. So basically, whenever she deals a critical hit, she'll actually give herself a critical strength up every time it hits. Yeah, it sounds confusing, but for the video that's playing in the background, you could possibly notice it. So for the arts up, it goes from 20% to 30%. The critical strength up goes from 10% to 20%. And the cooldown is from 8 to 6. Now for the noble Phantasm, it's called A Tour of Waterfalls in Various Provinces. I think I said that right. Rank B. It deals significant damage to a single enemy, and for overcharge, it increases your MP strength for 1 turn. And because she's a free MP5, if you get her to Noble Phantasm 5, her extra damage will be 1,500%. And for her overcharge effect for the Noble Phantasm up, it will go from 30% at MP1 and then 70% at MP5. Since this video is really special to me, I'm bringing along a special guest, which is Kawaii 50, and here he is now.
What's up, gang? Kawaii 50 here, chiming in out of nowhere because I promised to help and collab, and I try to be a man of my word. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some great allies for Saber Hokusai. Let's start with, of course, a freebie option in the form of Antonio Salieri. Salieri, of course, is recommended because of his Noble Phantasm, which has the ability to decrease the art's resistance for all enemies by 3 turns. With that art's resistance reduction, you can be sure that Hokusai's Noble Phantasm, as well as her critical damage, is gonna go through the roof. Of course, who can forget the absolutely incredible Prince of Lon Ling? And he is even more effective here considering Hokusai is a saber, he's a saber. Whatever you're fighting, it is probably weak to sabers. Of course, Lon Ling has his NP gauge boost, as well as his Arts card effectiveness, star drop rate, and critical strength boosts. All of these great for Hokusai with her focus on arts and critical damage. But do not forget about the Noble Phantasm Prince of Lon Ling in battle. And the main bonus this is going to provide is a 30 to 50% boost to Hokusai's attack, depending on the overcharge level. Continuing the trend of recommended sabers, I've of course got to mention Virgil from the Devil May Cry series. Actually, he's just very similar. This is Saito Hajime, and the reason he's great is because of his Mugyo Noble Phantasm. This deals a 20 to 40% arts resist reduction to the enemy, and that is activated before damage is dealt. In the event that Saito isn't going to be able to kill the opponent, Hokusai is going to be able to go in there and mop right up. It's an incredible combination. Of course, when we mention arts, we've got to give homage to Sherlock Holmes. That boost to Gift of Insight is still monstrous on JP to this day, granting a 10 to 20% arts resist reduction on all enemies for 3 turns. It also grants some critical stars as well, which Hokusai is just going to go ahead and gobble right up. Elementary, my dear, I'm sure you've used it multiple times, but let's just go ahead and reiterate for posterity's sake, decreasing the defense of all enemies, giving all of your allies ignore invincible and ignore defense, and also increasing their critical strength by a whopping 50 to 100%. For an arts crit saber like Hokusai, this is a match made in heaven. And finally, of course, on any crit servant, we know that we want those cards to show up right when we need them to show up. And this can end up playing out in one of 2 ways. You can either go ahead and chuck a BB on the field, have her use Faceless Moon in order to lock those command cards in place, or if you're looking for a more defensive option, there is, of course, Artoria Pendragon Ruler. Ruler Artoria can deal 5 brand new command cards, and the reason I recommend her more than BB is because she can increase the critical strength of all allies. Isn't that delightful on an arts crit saber like Hokusai?
My recommendation, I know that Kawaii 5 already gave his, but my recommendation would be Prince of Lanling for his arts up. You can also pair her up with Casa Artoria, and she basically gives you survivability with solemn defense. You'll also get a debuff cleanse with a Noble Phantasm, and she can also help you gain Noble Phantasm charge as well as invincibility and an arts up. The third recommendation is Caster Gilgamesh. What Caster Gilgamesh can do, he can basically give Hokusai an attack up, a critical star generation up, and she can also get an arts buff too. And if you didn't know, with enough arts up, you can actually MP spam really easily. So my idea is that if you actually put the 3 that I mentioned together, then you can actually have an MP spam team where Hokusai will always be MP spamming, and if it's a boss battle, like one of the supports might die, but you'll always have your MP up constantly for at least 3 turns.
Now, when it comes to command codes, we want to focus most of our command codes on increasing Hokusai's critical damage. That potential to crit is very, very high, so we want to make sure we're maximizing our gains off of that. Let's first take a look at Red Gem Lady's Command Seal, increasing the critical damage by 10% on the engraved card. And of course, even though NA's going to have to wait on this a bit, I've got to recommend Heavenly Child of Karama as well. Leave a slot open for that because this is a 20% critical damage boost on absolutely any card you want. Of course, there's also another great recommendation in the form of Majin-san, increasing the star absorption of the engraved card by 100% and increasing that same card's critical damage by 10% as well. You can go ahead and just get by with Code Burst in the meantime, but when these come out, go ahead and slot them in ASAP. As for Hokusai's remaining quick cards, there are a couple of ways we can deal with them. You, of course, can go all in on Debuff Cleanse. Debuff Cleanse being an incredible boon on any damage-dealing focused servant. White Vessel's Command Seal is, of course, the best one, but you can also go with the Friend Point Gotcha's lower power version, Code Cure. And finally, there is, of course, Da Vinci. Hokusai is going to be NP5 because you're going to grind the event for her. So why don't you go ahead and increase that Noble Phantasm damage on top of that? Remember, you have to use the card this is engraved on before the damage is dealt, but the trade-off always ends up being worth it.
So for Hokusai, I think she's mostly good for solos, or if not solos, I feel like she's just good to be the main damage dealer in most teams. So I feel like for her busted cards, you should focus on either critical strength up or some way to kind of get past invincibility. So my recommendation is Fine Sword, which is available in the current summer event if you want to know. I also recommend BB Slot for mostly like a busted card so that she can actually deal a lot of damage. And on top of that, she'll also be able to kind of give herself a little bit of a buff. And the command code Love Hunter. Now for her arts cards, I feel like those should have healing and some other effect that will actually get you to do more critical damage or some other way to actually give you a little bit more of a boost in damage for your arts cards. Briar the White Rose and also Maiden of Orleans to kind of help you get a little bit more HP whenever you're wanting to heal. Now for her other arts card, I recommend Brush of the Mad Painter or any of the other ones that would kind of help you gain more critical strength or kind of give you more critical star absorption to actually help you crit more because she's really focused on getting a lot of crits in and then dealing more critical damage. And one of the ones that actually gives you a little bit higher star gather rate would be the Inexperienced Fantasies Command Seal. This also works well with the Mystic Code that I got from the Servant Fest event. Now, for her quick cards, I recommend something that's a little bit more for debuff cleansing or some kind of special attack. So that way that she can actually give herself some more MP, a little more survivability, and possibly deal a little bit more damage if possible. Well, my three recommendations would be White Vessel's Command Seal, Wedge of the Heavens, and Mage of Flowers.
I'd just like to end this with thanks so much for having me. I'm always super stoked to do any kind of collab, and with Saber Hokusai being so good, this was a very, very good call. If you want to go ahead and check out any of my videos on Fate Grand Order, or of course other games, you can check me out at Kawaii50 on YouTube.
Once again, thank you so much for joining me, Kawaii50, and hopefully we'll do another collaboration like this again soon. I also wanted to say thank you to everyone that has watched this video. I greatly appreciate it. And hopefully this video actually helped you figure out how to use Hokusai a little bit more and how to kind of get it to her greatest potential as either a main DPS or kind of a servant that could just be in the back line and then just be used like Hercules pretty much, but for sabers, but for lancers. So yeah, that's about it. Like if you want, share if you want, and subscribe to become a legend in the making. See you next time, bye, and we are proven to be legendary. Stay legendary. And by the way, if you wanted a little bit more of an in-depth guide on Hokusai, well, Summer Hokusai at least, then you can actually go to Kawaii 50's channel, and, well, I'll actually link in the description and the pinned comment to his video on Saber Hokusai, and he goes a little bit more in depth than I do here, so please feel free to check out his channel. See you next time.